Hey, everyone, welcome.
Again, good evening, welcome all. My name is Jim Lawrence, and I'm the incoming chair of the board of FxSMC County. FxSMC County, as you know, is a grassroots organization of like-minded individuals who care deeply about this county and all of our residents. Our mission is to place on the 2024 ballot a voter initiative to create a civilian oversight board and inspector general for the San Mateo County Sheriff's Office. First, let me thank all the co-sponsors for their support and assistance for this meeting tonight. We are honored to have with us Mr. Alan Asch. Alan is an attorney. He's also co-chair of the Sacramento area ACLU. Under Alan's leadership, Sacramento County voters passed a ballot initiative and put in place a Citizens Oversight Committee and Inspector General for Sacramento County Sheriff's Office. An accomplished artist, as well as a passionate driver of social change for equal and lawful treatment of all residents. Alan has agreed to talk to us tonight about their journey and experience securing voter approval for their Citizens Oversight Committee in Sacramento. Thank you, Alan, and I turn it back over to you.
Hi, my name is Paul Bocanegra, and I'll be asking Mr. Alan Asch some questions, a series of questions, and there'll also be some sub-questions that come with that. So thank you for joining us tonight, Mr. Asch. And if whenever you're ready, I'd like to ask you a series of questions with some sub-questions to gain a little insight, not only for myself, but for everyone here tonight on what the benefits are of this, why we should support this, and how can we achieve that. So whenever you're ready, I'd like to begin asking you some questions.
Oh, we're gonna allow you to talk to us for a few moments first. Also.
Okay, yes.
Okay. Proceed, Alan.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. I did want to talk a little bit about the story. And I appreciate that introduction. One correction I want to make is in Sacramento County, we actually didn't get the oversight board through a voter initiative. It was passed by our board of supervisors. And I'm going to talk for about 5 minutes or so about what we did over the last 4 years. First, before I start, I want to make clear that the story I'm telling, I'm going to use the word we to refer to a pretty diverse coalition of groups that worked on the issue. And for a lot of the story, especially near the beginning of the story, I personally and the Sacramento ACLU chapter played a smaller supportive role. With that in mind, about 4 years ago, the ACLU Sacramento chapter was already working in a small supportive role on police accountability. We had already identified a problem that I'm going to screen share here. We were partnering with the coalition, including our local Black Lives Matter chapter, which made this infographic. And this infographic here is already very effective and disturbing, I think, and only shows you people killed by police in 2016, not other uses of force or allegations of misconduct, not resulting in death. And also notice 5 of the 11 killed in the 11 months were killed by the Sacramento Sheriff's Department. So we already had some success the previous year, strengthening the Oversight Commission for the Sacramento City Police Department, working with this large coalition of local community groups. So we met with and we listened to the community again, and we heard many community members talk about their frustration getting answers, information, or almost anything from the Sheriff's Department when deputies use force on them or their loved ones. And so out of these initial discussions came a list of demands, which I'm going to put into the chat here if I can. Hold on. there it is. So yeah, this is a list of demands to give the community oversight of the sheriff. This was a list posted by the Black Lives Matter Sacramento chapter. It has like 9 different detailed demands, some of which are more achievable than others. The Sacramento ACLU chapter consulted with ACLU staff looking at what kind of sheriff oversight had worked in San Diego County and Los Angeles County. And we simplified our chapter goal to fit in like a single sentence. We wanted community-based sheriff oversight with subpoena power. So we participated in this call-in and email campaign targeting our Board of Supervisors, like you can see in the Black Lives Matter call to action post that I put in the chat there. And we went to Board of Supervisors meetings, making public comments, first starting making public comments on items not on the agenda. And we kept calling for the Board of Supervisors to put the issue on the agenda. But what actually eventually got the issue on the agenda was our sheriff's bad behavior in reaction to even a small amount of oversight. So much so that our local paper had this headline, "Sheriff Gone Rogue. Welcome to Sacramento County, where he calls the shots." So that was his reaction when he only had a very little amount of oversight at that time, because the district attorney in our county had never charged any police officer with a shooting. But we did have an inspector general, unlike San Mateo County. And so this was a former police officer, actually former Sacramento police chief, who had been hired to basically audit the investigations of the sheriff's department. And so there was this one shooting that the inspector general reviewed, the tragic death of Michael McIntyre, a man who was undergoing a mental health crisis, who threw rocks at a sheriff's deputy and ran away along the freeway. And in response, deputies fired a total of 28 rounds at him, including 7 that struck him, killing him. No deputies were ever charged for the killing or even disciplined, but the inspector general report did find the use of force was excessive, unnecessary, and put the community at risk because, they were firing on the freeway. And as far as I'm concerned, this oversight pretty much amounted to harsh language, but our sheriff reacted by locking the inspector general out of the sheriff's department building, basically terminating him from being able to do oversight. And that's where this "Sheriff Gone Rogue" headline came from. And so the sheriff's refusal to accept even this smaller amount of oversight got a lot of news coverage, and over 100 community members attended a December 2018 Board of Supervisors meeting calling for a community-based sheriff oversight panel with subpoena power. But at that point, the supervisors only decided to hire a new inspector general and to strengthen their cooperation agreement with the sheriff. So when even those steps didn't go anywhere for many months, the Sacramento ACLU chapter decided to hold this community forum here. This was back in August 2019. And we invited all the supervisors. 2 of them accepted and 1 actually attended. We gave a platform to the problem we'd started with, the frustration of our community members not getting answers, information, or almost anything from the sheriff's department when deputies use force on them or their loved ones. And over 150 people attended, including representatives of many community coalition members. Also, we had a representative there from Assembly Member Kevin McCarty's office, who had this bill, AB 1185, that I know you all know about, that makes clear that counties can have these type of sheriff oversight boards. But despite all our work on this issue for years, what really got us to the goal was the nationwide uprising after the murder of George Floyd. During those summer 2020 protests, we had an open seat in one of our supervisor districts, and even the former CHP officer running in that district started posting about the need for increasing trust with law enforcement. Here's that post from Rich Desmond, June 6th. And when he eventually got into a debate, he was asked about that, and he came out in favor of AB 1185, and he was the more conservative candidate running. And then another one of our supervisors during that summer attended a conference on police oversight and actually came back and finally put sheriff oversight on the agenda. And because of all our years of work, we already had the coalition, and we already had our understanding of the problem and our demands for change. And so we held discussions with individual supervisors, between the supervisors and impacted members of the community. We mobilized people to make public comments at several Board of Supervisors meetings. And as the proposal evolved, I think because of the organization and pressure that we already had, that's why we got subpoena power. And then it was actually back on May the 4th of this year that the Board of Supervisors actually passed what they call the Community Review Commission with subpoena power, and they've been appointing members. It actually has never met yet, but that's what happened in Sacramento, and that's the process. So that's my story.
Thank you so much, Mr. Asch, for that presentation and for that information that you so kindly shared with San Mateo County. So I have, again, sorry for jumping the gun earlier. I have a series of questions here, some of them which may be redundant with some of the information that you've provided, but hopefully that if you missed something the first time around, that this would be an opportunity to maybe go into greater detail about something that you might just remember. So it's about 6 questions with a couple of sub questions. So whenever you're ready, I'd like to be able to ask you these questions for our community here.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. And yeah, that my story, just split it to put it into 5 minutes. I kind of left some stuff out, and yeah, it is a little bit simplified, but yeah, I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you so much, and that's perfect. So this will be an opportunity to expound on some of that. So the first question that we have here was, why did you first get involved with this oversight effort? And then there's a couple of sub questions, but I'll let you maybe give us a little bit more about that.
Well, me personally, I helped form the Sacramento ACLU chapter back in 2006, and over the first several years, I got to know our sheriff in Sacramento, and he showed why it is that sheriffs need oversight. First, I got to know him when we first passed AB 109 realignment. And he took all this money for the sheriff's department to reopen this jail, and then sort of didn't even use it for what he said he was going to use it. And then when the Trust Act passed, he refused. I know your sheriff just recently said that he's not going to cooperate with ICE anymore. Well, we had ICE in our jail for a long time, and our sheriff said he wouldn't enforce the Trust Act that was supposed to say you're not supposed to turn people over to ICE. And he cooperated with the Trump administration. And so I would say the personality of our sheriff in Sacramento County personally is what made me see the need for sheriff oversight so clearly.
Yeah, no, and thank you so much. And there are stark similarities in some of the behaviors that took place there that have been displayed here, a trajectory of the latter. So thank you so much. So the next couple of quick questions here are, how and why did you start your coalition, and who were your partners, and what did each bring to the table? So such as maybe grassroots organizations, what are some of the partnerships that you felt that were necessary components to be able to move your agenda forward?
Yeah, well, like I said at the beginning, when the ACLU chapter first got involved, there were a lot of groups already involved. The Black Lives Matter Sacramento chapter was a big leader that's where I put the ACLU chapter's most support was into supporting what they were doing. But there are I can't even remember the names of, there was the law enforcement accountability directive is a local group, but there was a SAC NAACP. There's the SAC Act, which is a PICO, our local PICO group that is a local churches. But I think it was really important to have impacted communities and, you know, BIPOC people who were in the leadership positions. I like, that's kind of why, you know, I did supportive stuff like trying to do analysis of what other counties were doing. And I did like video editing and stuff, but to have like the people out in front speaking, like you'll see let me see, I think one other thing I forgot to put in the chat was, if you want to look at the August 2019 community forum that we did, I actually have it on YouTube still, the whole thing. And you'll see like we really spotlighted people who were impacted by the bad behavior of the sheriff. So that was important to put their voices in front.
That's awesome. Yeah, definitely. We do need representation, and those that are system impacted are the lived experience that really motivate a plight such as this. So thank you for that. The second question we have here is, Oversight is brand new in Sacramento County. And have you seen meaningful change yet? And you kind of elaborated a little bit about that, that they have yet to meet. So, you know, that's a really good indicator of something that we may experience here if we're successful in this. And so maybe that'll give you an opportunity to share, like, what are your plans to try to expedite this meeting, or to try to move that meeting forward? Like, if there's any discussion there amongst your coalition.
Well, it's just how slow things work with the County Board of Supervisors. I showed you May the 4th is when they actually passed this resolution. They started accepting applications. The way our commission set up, each supervisor gets to appoint 2 people, and then the county executive appoints 1 for an 11-member commission. And they accepted applications in July, and I submitted one. I just recently found out I'm not going to be appointed by my supervisor, who's the former California Highway Patrol officer.
Wow.
But they have, like, they just appointed, I think the 9th of the 10. There's still like one more. They haven't, one supervisor still has one more person to appoint, and then the county executive. So they've just been drawing. That's why they haven't met, because they don't even have all the members appointed. But two people from our coalition have been appointed by some of the more liberal supervisors. So, I mean, our coalition does have representation, and some of the other people I think are, so I think that once it meets, it has the opportunity to do some real good, but obviously, since it's still in the process, there's been no change yet.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much. You kind of answered one of the other questions that I had following this. So the question would be then, how can we ensure that people selected are genuinely reflective of the community and avoid the pitfall of the Board of Supervisors selecting their buddies? Like in the instance that you just explained, having discussed and analyzed the situation that you're currently in there, what are some of the ideas maybe that you have that can help us avoid a pitfall such as the one that you just described?
Well, one thing we started trying to do and we didn't have time to do, I was talking to Nancy about this in our pre-interview, is that we tried to get together a community slate, like 2 people in each of our 5 supervisor districts who our community coalition would endorse and advocate for. And we had a few people from our coalition who applied and got sort of some ad hoc support, but we never really got that organized effort together. And that probably would have been a better thing to do, especially to come to the Board of Supervisors with a whole slate of community endorsed people. And yeah, that's what I would say.
Oh, so that makes that, and that's extremely helpful. So preemptively providing the community's beliefs on who should be representing them at this prior to a selection process. That's awesome. Thank you so much. for that insight. That's very sensitive. The other question that is kind of, you kind of answered it in a way, is how were Inspector General and Civilian Oversight Commissioners selected? And you gave us an idea of how to get in front of this. So I think you kind of answered that, and we can probably move on to the next question. You fought for oversight for years. How did you cultivate support on the Board of Supervisors?
I mean, I would say that just by continuing to bring up the issue, to have like a consistent community support. And as I was saying during my talk, we actually brought up the issues during the election when there was an open seat. And because I mean, as I was saying also in the talk, I think the reason we were so successful was because the election just happened to be after the murder of George Floyd and the summer of protest. And we sort of took advantage of that moment to get people locked in on what now is more like centrist police reform. You know, at the time, people were talking about defund the police and also the abolitionist movement. And this is like a more centrist reform that became sort of like the middle position that our more timid politicians could support, I guess. I don't know. Anyway.
Right. No, that's awesome. Thank you for that. And the sub question that goes with that is, and I think you kind of shared that you were just reiterating some of the behaviors that had been demonstrated that really allowed you to gain the support. And so was there something specific maybe that, including with what you've mentioned, for instance, the behavior, the trajectory of the behavior, and maybe the response to some of the questions that the community had, was there something specifically that you can point to that you said, if it wasn't for this, we couldn't have tipped the scale?
Well, like the two big inflection points, like was the murder of George Floyd at the end, and then a couple years in when our sheriff decided he wasn't going to accept oversight from the Inspector General because of like the harsh language in the report. I think that really got a lot of people going. It got the Sacramento Bee, our local paper, and one of the guy who actually now heads the editorial board, Marcos Breton, wrote several editorials talking about our rogue sheriff. So, I mean, being able to highlight the bad behavior of the sheriff, and how also that without this oversight board, there's really no one. They're basically just investigating themselves, especially you all who don't even have an inspector general.
No. Yeah, no, yeah, you're absolutely right. That is something that is lacking here. And the only thing that we have that works really well with our current sheriff is the district attorney, Wagstaff. So, you know, so the next question here is a very good question. This is the fourth question. Both Sacramento and San Mateo counties have profoundly resistant sheriffs. How is effective oversight possible in these circumstances? And what would you recommend for us based on your lived experience with this?
Well, I mean, it's difficult. I mean, especially before AB 1185, our board of supervisors didn't see anyway. They just saw the sheriff as like a separately elected. They you know, since the sheriff is independently elected, they didn't see themselves as having much of an oversight role, and they hired this inspector general. But when the inspector general was thwarted in this lockout I was talking about, they basically just hired a new inspector general, and they tried to work out a memorandum of understanding. But I mean, the thing is, without someone with, you know, real subpoena power to like force compliance, it's not real oversight. That's, I mean, if you know, it's the difference between asking and being able to demand. And so I would make that clear that you know, the bad behavior, the only way to have any sort of power over the independently elected sheriff's bad behavior is if you have an independent community review board with the subpoena power.
Awesome, thank you. And so the second piece to that was, what would you recommend, having experienced that, being aware of the strong similarities between the sheriffs, what would you recommend that we do here based on your experience to be able to advance this effectively? If you could recommend anything.
Well, honestly, I don't know enough about San Mateo County and your supervisors. I had that brief conversation with Nancy where she was telling me that she didn't think you even had one supervisor who would necessarily support this. But I mean, I would start off, just because a ballot initiative is so difficult, having individual conversations with your 5 supervisors and see. When we started 4 years ago, we only had one supervisor who was on our side. But if you can start with one and get it on the agenda, and especially start building stories of people who've been impacted, then, and maybe get, like I said, your local news media, like we have the Sacramento Bee, then that's the kind of thing that maybe you can start adding those votes. And the thing is, we had like 1 vote, and then we had 2 votes for a long time. And then the weird thing was, once we got to 3 votes, all of a sudden we had 5 votes.
Right.
As soon as you hit 3, then everyone wants to get on board and be part of it or whatever. So
definitely have shared that experience. And so what if we had, we'll say maybe 2 or 3 members terming out here? Would that change the same recommendation that you just provided us here? Is that, would that kind of give us an advantage? Like, how should we maneuver, if you have any insight or direction on that?
Well, you can, like, you could bring the issue up in the debates and try to get both candidates on there. That's one of the things that happened in my supervisor district, is by the time the election was over, both candidates were in favor of an AB 1185 commission. I mean, like I was saying, we got lucky that our election happened in the summer after George Floyd's murder, but I mean, and if you can use lucky in that context, but if you have 3 open seats, then I don't know if you could host a debate, or or at least get your questions into debates hosted by one of your coalition members. I see you have like a large coalition. Right. Maybe some of those groups could host debates for your supervisors, and or you can also, like I was showing, they have social media pages where you might even get them to answer questions or take positions that way.
That is that's very good information. Thank you so much. And in fact, I think we have someone here that's joined us today that may be running, so I'm sure she's going to slide that in her little checklist. So thank you for that. And so the 5th question that we have here, and there are more questions coming in, so I'm going to try to kind of get through them so we can get to some of the questions in the chat box. I see that some of them that have come up are very good questions that I'd be curious to get your feedback on. So the 5th question here is, what would you change about Sacramento's sheriff oversight structure if you could? If you had the ability to change it, besides forcing the first meeting, what would be something that you change?
We wanted to have more requirements about the members of the commission, that they that certain percentage come from impacted communities, from formerly incarcerated people. I mean, I think the only thing we got was that there aren't supposed to be any active or law enforcement or former law enforcement on our commission. But I think we would have liked to have a lot more requirements to make it more representative.
Right. And so that leads us perfectly into the next question, and I'll kind of rephrase it because you kind of pointed something out. Do you have plans to pursue those changes? And as in the situation that you're all in there with the Board of Supervisors, the nominations not being reflective of the community that is being aggressively policed and prosecuted out there, sometimes right there on the street, as you shared. Are there any plans or discussions how you can possibly change how the Board of Supervisors are going about that selection process?
I mean, honestly, not right now. We did have some discussions when the resolution was still pending to try to get those things added, but I think at this point, we're just gonna try to, because we have a resolution that creates our commission, but then the commission's going to create its own rules with the county council. I think there's like, they already have like 6 months or a year's worth of work just like getting up and running before. I mean, I think that's something we'll come back to, but that's the good thing about having a long-term outlet. Outlook, we worked on it for 4 years, and we can come back to that in maybe a year or two. So
Good stuff. Thank you. And so the last question here with a couple of sub questions there is, if you were starting a sheriff oversight structure from scratch, and after having your experience, of course, what would you include that you kind of think that you missed out on the first time?
Well, that's kind of the same question. The one thing I think that's a problem for the sheriff oversight is the police officers' Bill of Rights, and sometimes the union contracts that the deputies have give them a lot of due process rights where you may not be able to call them in front of the commission. Like, I think they have a right to only be interviewed once. They get a grace period, and then they can only be interviewed once. And I mean, as a long-term project for sheriff oversight, because that I think requires a change to state law, and that's not a local thing, but it might be nice to give the commission more power and get rid of some of those special due process rights that police officers seem to have.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. And so a couple of these sub questions are: what's politically and pragmatically feasible, and where we're at today with Floyd starting to be behind us as people are starting to kind of forget. What do you think is feasible for us here in San Mateo to be able to pick up this torch and carry it on?
Well, I mean, that's a tough question. And like I said, I don't know the politics of San Mateo County, but that's something I worry a lot about, that I've seen the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act never passed federally, and a lot of momentum's been lost. I think that even at this point, I don't know if our Board of Supervisors would pass what they passed last May. It seemed like there's a lot of for various reasons, I watch a lot of like right-wing media, and they are really spending a lot of time demonizing defund the police and saying there are these big crime spikes. And
of course,
I'm worried that the tide is moving in the other direction. And but that's also a reason that to have a long-term outlook and keep working on it until, it'll come back around.
Right. Yeah. And that's great that you share that. So we had an unarmed man of color here executed. He was shot to death unarmed recently. And so, that is something that we can definitely lean on because it's fresh here in Daly City, where my younger sister lives at with my nieces. So everyone is still shook up about that. The last question here that I have before we move on to these other questions are: what pitfalls would you watch for? Like, what would you recommend that we keep vigilant for as we move forward with this oversight committee?
I mean, the main thing that I would say is to not let your demands go, too far and wide and detailed. Like I was saying, we got our demand basically down to one sentence, like community-based oversight panel with subpoena power, and we just kept with that. I guess you also want an inspector general, which is part of AB 1185 as well. So, I mean, you know, just trying to have a simple goal that you can stick with, I guess, and not, because there were a lot, if you look back at the 9 demands I started with 4 years ago that Black Lives Matter Sacramento had,
Right.
a lot of those, I don't think, some were not even achievable, I don't think, but.
Great, great. Thank you so much. That is the list that I had prepared, but I'm taking a look here in the chat box, and there's a series of very good questions. And I'm not sure if you have access to that chat box. I can possibly either read these questions, or maybe we can take them directly. I'm not sure which direction you'd like to move.
Or Paul, Mio had offered to take those questions from the
perfect.
chat. Yeah. So she can
Perfect.
get going.
Okay, thank you so much for providing this information and for giving me the opportunity to ask these questions on behalf of our community here in our county. It's been an honor, and I'm going to pass it on to Mia now. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Paul. Good talking to you.
Thank you, Paul. So I am going to just read off some of the questions that were put on the chat. Some of the questions might be repetitive, so we might skip them. And we have one audience member who can't access chat, and we will unmute that person towards the end. And I will be also tweaking some questions that I am curious about as well. The first question on the chat is, are there guidelines for who gets appointed to the committee? And I think you touched on this, but there were some requirements of the committee, and you didn't get all the requirements that you wanted except the non-law enforcement requirement. Can you explain a little bit about that process and why the requirements were not as you would have liked them to be?
It just didn't get traction with the Board of Supervisors. That's the problem with going the Board of Supervisors route and not writing your own ballot initiative is you start with, in fact, we had, like I said in my talk, one of our supervisors went to this law enforcement conference, and he came back with, even though we've been working on it for like 4 years, he came back and it was kind of like his idea, and he wanted to develop it, and we like pushed him. And I think if we hadn't kept pushing for subpoena power, he like originally didn't want subpoena power because he thought it was like too messy. And but that was one thing we got, and then law enforcement thing. But I think it's just because we couldn't get 3 votes, or even I think 1 vote for those types of requirements of impacted communities. I guess that's, even though we cared about it, the supervisors didn't really care.
Thank you. We have another question. It says, if out of the 9 demands that you listed, how many were implemented fully?
I'd have to go back and look at that list, but let me see. Where did I? But that Black Lives Matter Sacramento list, community-led commission, power to investigate police misconduct, police involved shootings, in custody deaths, and share. Well, that's, I don't even know if we're going to have investigatory power or not. That's sort of what's going to be decided during the creation of the commission. Power to discipline and enforce violations. We didn't get that. That's actually something not achievable because of the deputies union contract. Commission should have subpoena power. We got. Commission should have the power to develop and change the sheriff's department use of force policy. We sort of got that. That's something that the commission will be able to discuss and recommend. Should have the power to share data, information, and updates with the community, including footage and reports from incidents. We didn't get that. Commission should have community nominated and elected members only, with at least 2 members having been impacted by police brutality. No, we didn't get that. Commission's members should have absolutely no connection to law enforcement. We did get that. Commission members should be paid, and commission should be given a budget to do the work. Did not get that. So actually, I'd say we did not get a majority of those 9 original demands.
Thank you for that level of detail. And so the next question in the chat has to do more with what resonated with the Board of Supervisors and residents that changed. And I think you touched upon this about Board of Supervisor going to a conference and the George Floyd incident that resonated with people. So I think we're going to skip that question unless you have more to elaborate on that.
No, just that and the bad behavior of our sheriff that, I mean, really kind of thumbed his nose at the Board of Supervisors and their power. So
the next question here is, when you were advocating for civilian oversight, what were the most common arguments against it, if any, that you heard from people who are not in law enforcement?
Well, I mean, our sheriff has like a whole contingent of fans and he posts on Facebook and sometimes get them to show up. So I remember their talking points were, you know, he's independently elected and they're trying to get away, or they're trying to chip away at the authority that he's gotten from the people who elected him. Nobody elected these people to do anything to our sheriff, who, you know, it was basically that his independent election and authority from the people was their main argument.
And we have another question of, do you have any advice for how oversight can push back against abuses that enable the law enforcement unions, or is there a better tactic? So this goes to the remark about the unions.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I'm hoping our commission will do is look at the union contracts before they come up for renewal and make sure that that the public understands what's in there and that maybe it actually becomes an issue for the Board of Supervisors. I mean, there's nothing that says the commission can't look at that. And I actually talked to our Inspector General a few weeks ago about things the commission could do, and I didn't mention that. But another thing is look at all the policies of the Sheriff's Department and make recommendations. But yeah, I think people don't really look at all the provisions in the union contract that don't help with accountability and transparency, and the commission could help with that.
And we have another question in terms of the sheriff's reaction. Did you find that the push for oversight caused the sheriff to try to head it off by making policy changes, or was he purely pushing back against it entirely?
The sheriff has actually been kind of quiet about this oversight commission. And I don't know exactly why that is. He's not running for re-election. So in June 2022, there'll be a new sheriff elected. So maybe that's why. But one thing, you know, I said I had talked to our Inspector General a few weeks ago, and he told me that after the whole situation with the lockout, where the Sheriff's Department got a lot of backlash for, you know, the whole rogue sheriff thing, that the sheriff was actually trying to be especially cooperative. He thought that they were acting on his request quickly and trying to, I guess, avoid that kind of backlash. So I think maybe to that extent that there was some effect on our sheriff, not so much the commission, but from the backlash from locking out our Inspector General.
And I have, I guess, my own personal question, follow-up question on that. In our county, the current sheriff basically hears what the Board of Supervisors say. And so in your experience, was there any, I guess, do you think the sheriff had any influence on the Board of Supervisors decision in that vote? in the vote, or do you think a strategy would be to advocate with the sheriff, so, or vice versa, the board of supervisors, to put some pressure on the sheriff?
Paul was saying earlier that your sheriff is kind of like our sheriff here in Sacramento, that he's a difficult sheriff, or I mean, from our point of view, we weren't going to get any sort of cooperation or positive response from the sheriff. We actually, 4 years ago, we invited him to, when he was running for re-election, we invited him to a debate, and there were a couple other people running. He was the one candidate who didn't show up. So our sheriff specifically has said nasty things about the ACLU and our position on immigration. So I never really thought that working with the sheriff on this was a possibility for us. I don't know whether your sheriff is more approachable, but our strategy was always to try to win over a majority of the Board of Supervisors. And the sheriff was our example of why we needed oversight, not our partner in getting it.
And then under those lines, I have 2 follow-up questions to this topic. Do you know why your sheriff is not running for re-election? Does it have to do something with the new oversight structure?
I don't think it has to do with the new oversight structure. I'm not sure why. He barely got over 50% of the vote last time. He's been sheriff for, I think, 12 years now, and he's had a bunch of scandals. But I mean, and he also ran for Congress against Ami Bera and lost in a previous election year. So I don't know if he sees himself moving on to a different political future, but the short answer is I don't know why he's not running for re-election.
Okay. And then, do you know if how friendly the relationship between the Sacramento Board of Supervisors and the current sheriff was?
He's in a big feud with a couple of our Board of Supervisors. Then there were another 2 who he was very close with, and then one sort of like swing vote. One of his biggest supporters has left and has been replaced with this former California Highway Patrol officer who now represents me in my district. I don't think he's as close with the sheriff, but he is. I mean, I think he's still pro law enforcement. But I'd say that he has good relationship with a couple and bad relationship with a couple.
And we have just one more question from the chat, and then I'm gonna pass it over to the person with their raised hand who can't access the chat. That question is, what are those law enforcement unions that / state-enabled rights that let deputies avoid testifying to the Oversight Commission?
Well, there's a state law, the Police Officers Bill of Rights. I can't remember the exact name, but it gives a whole bunch of different procedural rights to police, and then they're also put in. You'd have to look at the union contract for your county. That I actually got the Deputy Sheriff's Association contract through a public records request for Sacramento County. So and they have to give it to you for a public records request. So you could just get your local one and read it and see what it is, if there's anything in there that gives them extra procedural rights. Like ours, I believe, gives a specific way that deputies can be disciplined. So that's why I was saying that of those 9 demands where the commission wanted to discipline officers, they couldn't do that. And I think that which county was it? Was it Sonoma County? One of the counties there is in
Santa Clara, I
Santa
believe.
Clara County. That's right. Is in a fight with their ballot initiative because of the discipline part. And also there is some procedural rights in the state law, like I said.
Thank you. And now I'm going to pass it over to the person, Mike, who has raised his hand to ask a question. I'm going to unmute you, Mike. There you go.
Okay. Hey, Alan, Mike Levinson. Very clear and informative as usual. I appreciate it.
Oh, hey,
My
Mike.
question is kind of, hi, how are you doing? My feeling is that we have to make a tactical decision, as you said earlier, about whether to go the initiative route or through the Board of Supervisors. My question is kind of at the back end. Let's just say we go one particular route and it passes. Which way is easier to undo? Or just like you said, politically, if things go reasonably well for 3 or 4 years with whoever the sheriff is next, there could be a movement to undo the Oversight Commission. And I'm wondering if it's more easily done just by a Board of the Supervisors voting, or if it's got to go through an initiative if we do it through an initiative.
See, that's a tough question, Mike. I'm not sure I know the answer to that
It's
question.
part of
I guess-
1185, I guess.
Yeah, I guess
Is
it,
part of 1185.
I mean, our Board of Supervisors just did a resolution. They could have done a resolution or an ordinance. So that was like the most temporary thing they could do was a resolution. I don't know if your ballot initiative would be like a charter amendment, which I think is harder and requires a higher vote count. That is like stuff I researched a long time ago, but now I can't remember the exact answer. One thing I do remember with the ballot initiative process, I think there is like a point where the Board of Supervisors can like take your ballot initiative and like water it down and do theirs instead once you get all the signatures. So I know that happened with a rent control thing we did here in Sacramento, and there was even like a change in state law where like they could get the sponsors to, you didn't even have to have all the sponsors withdraw it, or anyway. So there are all, that's like something you should talk to an elections lawyer or someone who knows more about it than I do, but that's a tough question, Mike, but sorry,
No,
I can't totally answer it.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Alan, for answering these additional questions from the chat. I'm going to pass it now back to Paul for some ending remarks.
Hi again, everyone. My name is Paul Bocanegra, and I am the co-chair. I decided to be the co-chair. I asked to be the co-chair to Fix in San Mateo because of the experiences that I've had since returning back to the community. So I'll explain a little bit of what that means. I was born and raised in San Jose, and at 17 years old, I was in a vehicle when an adult gang member shot and killed another gang member. And for being in this vehicle, never having a gun, discharging a gun, I was condemned to die. I was tried as an adult and then condemned to life without parole plus 4 years because of reform. I began transitioning from the cage back to the community in 2017, September 28th, after serving about 25 and a half years in prison. And so what brings me to Fix in San Mateo County is that I'm also a juvenile justice delinquency prevention commissioner for the county of San Mateo and co-founder of a nonprofit, a reentry nonprofit. And my lived experience with the second layer of the punishment model by the community, as well as working hand in hand with policies derived by people like these sheriffs, we're seeing a rise in aggressive policing. Many kids that look like me, that speak the same language as I do, that I see myself in, make up majority of the bodies in these cages that we have here, 180 of them that we spend $152 million on, and we spend $2 million on each kid. 16 kids, more than 90% of them Hispanic. And so seeing the rise also in the foster system, and this is specific to the situation that brings me here to Fix in San Mateo, is the foster system has experienced an influx of Hispanic youth being fostered here in San Mateo County. Over 50% now of these youth are And so we have policies here that are focusing on obliterating the Brown nuclear family. Here, they are being aggressively policed and then deported. And so the ripple effect of our current sheriff just really raised a flag on me. It's one more form of an expedited gentrification policy that is being pushed here, and they're focusing on our kids now. And we've seen this with myself in 1992 at 17 years old, but watching this unplay right before my eyes as I live here in Redwood City and Eagle Hill is just it's shaken me to the core that the policies now have become more sophisticated, more centered on certain cultures, and they're successful. They're being successful right now. And so I came to Fix in San Mateo because there is immediacy required here to save the next generation. Like, we're not talking about adults who have the ability to make a decision and come here. We're talking about the collaterals, the kids now. And we here, our sheriff is focusing on that. And I'm watching it with my lived experience now as a delinquency prevention commissioner, and trying to prevent that when I have a sheriff on the other side deporting parents and fostering kids that eventually fall in the hands of gang members, addicted cousins, and other various obstacles that reside in these toxic environments. With these environments working against our youth and elected officials that are well-funded, very sophisticated, working against these youth really do not stand a chance. There'll be no one like me here in this county in the next 10 years if we allow this to continue. So I felt the need to step up in some other manner and start focusing on some adult behavior now. And so that's what I hope to bring here to Fix in San Mateo, is some accountability to some adults here that are preying on our youth of color now. And I think that line has been breached. I think it is apparent, and the trajectory of this current sheriff, I think, explains why the need is here to really create an oversight committee to be able to just stop some of the behaviors and practices that have become common. And I think majority of the people here do not want to see their kids adopt these attitudes and behaviors of our leaders that exist here today. So that's a little bit of who I am, and it's been an honor being able to ask you these questions. I love ACLU, Northern Peninsula. I support them, they support me. And so thank you for your support. And everyone, I want to thank everyone who has joined us tonight that feels the need, that sees and has experienced someone or know someone. And if you don't, you know now, you've met me, that has really had to overcome not only obstacles, but concrete mazes. And that's what's happening right now at a younger level, at the younger generation that lack agency and lack a voice. And that's what brings me here, is I am that voice. And I think that I'm representative of that voice that is being suppressed right now at the moment. So thank you so much, everyone. And we had a really great night, and I really look forward to gaining more support and learning more about other ideas that other people may have to offer that can bring accountability to somebody who's actually kind of smart with this recent decision to rescind that policy of deportation. So we're seeing some maneuvering taking place right now, but a leopard doesn't change its spots. And so I think that everyone sees this recent decision as a political tactic to stay alive. So thank you so much, everyone. So there are some websites there, if you could look into them, and definitely sign up, take this survey, and align yourself with other community members that see a need to really address this and support us. So I want to thank everybody for joining today, and I really look forward to having more of you take this survey or pass it along to someone that you believe may be able and willing to support this cause here.
Thank you, Paul. That's great. And thank you everyone for coming. We will send out a follow-up email. And we're trying to get that survey out in every community to 1,000 or more residents of the county. So please share that link, take it yourself if you haven't, and join us.